It's just another night for Supernatural Girlz. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only Supernatural Girlz.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girlz Radio. I am your host, Patricia Baker, and I'm here with my co-host all the way from Tucson, Patricia Kirkman. PK, how you doing tonight?
Fabulous. We had rain last night, and we've had rain on and off today. Yahoo!
Wow.
Good for the
we
desert.
got up into the double digits. It was like a heat wave at 20 degrees. It was amazing.
Oh,
You know how
that's nice.
we have really been suffering here with some
very
bitter cold weather. I don't want to talk about it. All right.
It's going to be in the 70s in the next day or two, but it's okay.
Oh,
I won't throw that at you.
I can't wait. But listen, tonight, this is a guest I've been really excited about getting on the air. Haven't you?
Oh, definitely. And after I read the book, oh my goodness gracious.
I know it. It's a great book. We've got Nigel Kerner. He has written a book. He's written several books, but the one we're talking about tonight is Gray Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls. We're going to get into this whole explanation of how and why this is happening. And guess what? We do believe that he's right. This is happening. So we're going to get with Nigel in just a few minutes. But before we do that, Ms. Kirkman.
Yes, ma'am.
What's going on with the numbers? You got to know where we stand.
Well, firstly, it's a month of creativity. We've talked about that, but creativity is key in communications. And because it's creative, let's use metaphysics in getting some real answers. I think that's really important for us. I think if we learned how to meditate, use the skills that we have, and looking into the spaces around us to find out where we can put some of these, well, I'll say, unlearned skills that need to be learned, say like your dreams. You are an expert in dream interpretation and working with people for that, and people should contact you about that, by the way. But how else are they going to learn? It's hard for us to work these things by ourselves. We need people that are willing to teach us a little bit more of how to reach out and get the information we need. There's going to be all kinds of information coming all month, and information about UFOs possibly coming, do you think?
I think we're going to hear more and more about this. I really do.
And communication of all forms is revving up at the door, ready to just jump in at us. And I will have to throw out there, secrets are going to be made known some more this month. So this month is about gossiping, or let's get out there what we think we know, and in spite of all that, we're going to really find out what we need to know. So I think that's good.
I think that's all good because, as you well know, there's been a lot of secrets kept from us. We're going to be talking about a real big one tonight. Mm-hmm. And there's been things going on in the government. We hear that there may be some arrests coming, and it's going to blow everybody's mind, but we've heard it. Yeah. So we're going to see if this is going to happen, and I think it will. I think it will. It's a lot of stuff coming out.
Right. Well, think in terms of this. This is all about communication of all forms and things being, and as I used the phrase gossip before, but gossip is many times the most realistic form of information that we've got out there, because the other thing they shove under the corners. But we've got all that coming to us. But we're getting ready to go into looking at what we can creatively. Next month, it's going to be about restrictions and limitations. So we've got 3 weeks to get this stuff out there and out and about so that we're not behind the 8 ball when they start talking about what we know they're going to talk about.
Yes. Oh, boy. Well, this is going to be very exciting. So, yes, dream analysis. Mm-hmm. Also visiting your website, patriciakirkman.com. Get a reading from Patricia your numbers and what's coming up for you personally. This is the best way to do it and to find out what your hidden secrets are and what you need to deal with to make your life better. And that's at patriciakirkman.com. You can find both of us on our website, supernaturalgirls.com. You can just click on our email, say hello, send us a copy of a dream you want interpreted, or send Patricia a request with your birth date and birth name, and we'll take it from there. I got to sneeze.
Bless you.
But oh my God, that happened so fast I couldn't even hit the mute button.
Well, that's okay. We know you're real now, but this is live.
I'm real.
Okay.
This is live. This is
but
live
I did
radio.
want to say something about the dream interpretation. When we first started talking about dreams, I was kind of like, well, the more we've talked about it and the more you've told me about it and the more I've worked with it, I find that I'm starting to actually dream. I never thought I did.
Isn't that interesting? So you started paying attention, and now you have dreams to work with, giving you inner knowledge. That is the way to go, in my opinion. You want that inner knowledge. It's not out there. It's in here. And it's a great way to access it. And I also wanted to mention this. I hate to bring it up. I hate to bring up property taxes, right? I hate it. But we have a book on our website. Are you getting screwed on your property taxes? How to find out and how to fix it. And let me tell you what, you better read this book. It is on Amazon. You can click it on our website and go right to that link and pick up a copy. It's on Kindle, so you can read it easily on your machine, whatever machine you use to read. But let me tell you, if you think the assessors got it right, you better check. You better check their math. You better check their valuation of your property. And this book will tell you how to read your property record card and how to fight the system if you have to. It's not an easy system to fight. Everything's just stacked, and I mean stacked to the ceiling against you.
us.
This book is your weapon. It's your sword of justice. So, again, it's on our website. Yes, if you have property, if you own property, chances are you are getting screwed. So pick up a copy of that book and you will be in the right place to get it all figured out and fixed as much as you can with this rotten system that's in place. So anyways, we also have Opus Mego Kabbalisticum, translated from Old German. That is a great book. And as Lon Duquette told us about this book, when he was blindfolded and taken to some secret location where they have these amazing meetings for the occult, guess what was in their library? This book. And he said this was the Harry Potter library. He said it was the most amazing library he's ever seen. And there was the book, Opus Mego Kabbalisticum, that we had translated. So you can also find that on our website, and I highly recommend you pick up a copy. It is old-time knowledge that you can use today. Very, very fascinating book. And we've got, of course, our Facebook page, Supernatural Girlz with a Z. We've got great stories. We have jet fighters chasing a UFO in Bulgaria. We have a first account of a werewolf sighting and experience. So you got to go to our Facebook page. We have the latest and greatest of all the paranormal news that you're going to want to see. It's on our Facebook page. Make sure you go, give us a like and a follow so you can keep in touch with all the latest supernatural paranormal news.
Also, remember that any of the shows from the past are available on that site as well.
That's right. We have our archives there. Just in case you missed our show on cannabis as a spiritual ally, we did that last week, and also had Ezra Parsibuck on to talk about the crazy laws and what's going on, especially in Massachusetts, where it just became legal recreationally. So lots of confusion, and Ezra helped us clear that up. And then we talked to Stephen Gray about the cannabis being used as a spiritual ally, like ayahuasca or any of the things in South America. So it was a fascinating discussion. I just loved talking to him, didn't you? Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
He's great. But tonight, we are so lucky to have this man on our show, right? He is staying up very late at night. There's the book.
This is the book.
Incredible book.
Fabulous book.
And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Nigel. He is an amazing man. He's a screenwriter. He's a journalist, and he's the author of another book called The Song of the Greys, and we just heard he has a third book coming out. Maybe he'll reveal a little bit of that while he's on the air with us tonight. But he has put together quite a book on the harvesting of souls, which, again, we think he's right on the money with this. We're going to hear all about it. So let's get him on the show. Nigel, welcome to
Nigel.
Hey.
Hello there, Patricia. Hello there, PK.
Hello,
everyone
Nigel.
in the studio over there.
Yes, it's
Well-
a pleasure to have you here with us.
Well, you guys, I hope you're not snowed under. We've been hearing some really disturbing stories about America and the huge storms you get there.
Yes,
But as
don't get me
I look
started.
out of my window, there's no snow here.
Oh, well, isn't that nice?
I have no snow. I see no snow, but Patricia does.
Oh, we've seen snow, we've seen ice, we've seen temperatures minus 11, minus 20. Oh, good Lord. It's been
My
awful.
children would love that tomorrow morning.
Oh. The pleasures of living in New England, Nigel. Well, let's get started on this. This subject is fascinating, and you know it's one of the most exciting subjects for our audience. And we all want to know more about all of this. But how did you get started with this whole topic of UFOs? This is a personal story, isn't it?
Well, as I said, my side of learning is in science mainly, and it wasn't anything to do with UFOs or anything like that. Things I consider to be rather exotic subjects and so forth. I'm a real down-to-earth, mundane old individual who rolls along heaven or hell all day, whichever way you like to say. And my children actually keep me posted in interesting things. And some years ago, about 40 years ago, as I said earlier, my young boy, who's well hitched up between the ears and usually very adept at getting me in real trouble after researching subjects and coming and asking me pointed questions where I end up with egg on my face. One such question was, Dad, are UFOs real? I had a bit of a reputation as a writer at the time, and so I decided to actually take him up on this and disaffect him of the idea and say that Star Wars is strictly for Hollywood and so forth.
So you were a skeptic when you started out.
You can imagine what a child's reaction to all that was. In any case, I was going to tell my son, look, this is nonsense, and I'll show you why it's nonsense. I will demonstrate it logically. And I took to all the research I could do in a week. I asked for a week's range check on his question, and I went and I looked it up, and I had a bit of a rush around about, all the books I could get. And as I looked more and more into it, I couldn't put the subject down. I found that I was getting more and more fascinated by the contradictions I was getting to my premise that all of this was in fact really some blue sky thing. There was nothing to it. However, 40-odd years later, and 3 and 4 books almost past it, with commentaries coming from all over the world and a research team of my own that has to stand up to some very sharp questions based upon logic and rationale, I decided that this would be something to really look at over the years. And I've discovered that our world is not what it seems to be at all. And of course, ordinary people sitting at home trying to answer the day's questions, and so forth, how to live a productive life and all the rest of it. That's really wonderful. But I had to understand what thought was. How do we know things? Where do these things actually manifest in terms of our bodies? How do we pick thought up? Do we make it in our brains? Are our bodies just an aerial that actually pick up these incredible amorphous things that cannot be touched or actually verified physically? All these things have to be looked at if you want the world to take you seriously these days, particularly as science is advancing so quickly and everything can be proved in tangible ways, if you see what I mean, Patricia. So it's not something that we can take lightly if we're serious and we really want to look at these things. And of course, my approach is much more that. And as I've gone along, of course, I've got far more into the human dimension of things and discovered that we as beings are just one wondrous thing. No matter what we are, how badly things have treated, life has treated us, or where we've taken ourselves, we might call ourselves losers or winners or whatever it is, the one glorious thing that makes us so wonderful and precious is life, is livingness. And that in this world there are two things basically fundamentally. That which lives has life, and that which does not live. Synthetic things, things we make, we manufacture and produce. And this UFO phenomenon really deals with that second department. Things that somewhere natural beings, natural living beings create as utilities to do their work, as we do with robots now, make things simpler for us in the garden, whatever, and do the utilities of our life. And these things, if you make them sophisticated enough, and we're trying to do that now, the great lesson is don't ever do that. If we make robots and roboids with artificial intelligence, our livingness will be over. And I'll tell you why.
Wow.
In 125 or maybe 150 years, shall we say, on the outside, we have invented technology. That's all. It's only 150 years. And we've got all the things we've done, gone to the moon, past the moon, all the marvelous things, just in 150 to 160 years, so to speak, from technology. Now, can you imagine out there in the universe a planet that might have evolved for 10,000 years like that? What they could be doing? That's a huge thought. And of course, I looked at it in that kind of context and thought, what might be possible if 160 years can give us all these incredible things? What if there are planets out there? There have to be. They're finding thousands of them now, like our Earth, in space through telescopes or whatever. So we therefore have a big deal on our hands here. If one of these things comes here or sends a load of those things here, shall we say, what are we going to do in the stare of these incredible things? And it seems that for the last 100 years or so, we have the technology to actually make records of these things and see now that we are not alone in the universe, that these things are here. They are here for something. And that something may well be the propensity we have to actually live, and how they themselves can use that living capacity we have for their benefit, because these are robots. You can't travel at 8,000 miles an hour in a vehicle and stop or move so that you can cover our planet without being a stain inside the window. Gravity will smash you to a pulp. So biological beings can't fly these things. It has to be some kind of machine that can withstand those forces. So if machines are flying in these UFOs traveling at 8,000 to 30,000 miles an hour, I believe Gordon Cooper saw one of your astronauts saw one moving at 30,000, they all came to the idea, as a very reputable chap, Ed Mitchell, would say, my goodness, this is incredible. They are here. So what do we do as a family of living beings, humankind, with a proposition like this facing us? And that's what led me to write the books, to ask questions of our consciences and so on. What, as human beings, do we do with this dilemma? Sorry about that monologue.
Question.
But I had to
no,
say
it's
quickly.
fine, Nigel. Yeah, no, this is you gave us a great preamble to this whole situation.
Yeah. We need to think. Yeah. We need to think.
We do.
It's a big deal to have these.
It's a very big deal, and of course, then we have adversarial situations at the same time with the government that has information and won't release it. So then also trying to discredit people who have information and who've been trying to spread the information. So we've got these adversarial elements that don't want us to know the things that you're trying to find out, and we've all been trying to find out for
Right.
a long time. It's very frustrating.
Indeed, Patricia, the thing is they make us so small when we want to know. Their size is so huge, these agencies. What would it be if these things coming from fairly advanced planets and far cries in the universe come to our planet, would they not be now in charge? Of course they would be in charge. If they are in charge, are we in fact at the end of what they're giving us? If they come here from something that's so highly developed they can travel at 30,000 miles an hour when our planes can't reach 1/10 of that, then we have to ask the question, who is in charge?
Yeah, we'd like to know.
Mm-hmm. We know who isn't.
We know we're not.
Yeah, I know that. The whole point about it is we are, because I think if these are machines, they are controllable by us if we know they are that. And that we as living, wonderful beings, we may have a facility that they can't ever have and they want. Because remember, they've come here as machines to manipulate something that they found on our little planet, which makes humanity something romantically beautiful, but very powerful, because we can think, we can know, and they are just artificial computers that add knowledge on and don't understand that they even exist. Just like any computer doesn't know it is thinking or it's doing what it's doing. If you see what I mean. So we have an advantage over them, but we must know what they are. And that's why I've written the books and try to ask people, tell your story, shout it out all over the world. And then maybe this little family of ours of whatever, 7 billion people on the earth might be able to actually know where we are going and withstand any threat that might come from something even 10,000 years old, simply because they are artificial and not living. And so what does living mean? Life and death. What a wonderful thing that is. That's what the great teachers told us. It's a wonderful thing to talk about.
It is.
The lacking of emotion. What I hear from what you're saying, Nigel, they have no emotion. They can think by what their program is. But where we have the emotional element to feel, they can never have that.
Absolutely. And that is our great advantage. No matter how primitive we might be, that marvelous facility that you've so eruditely affirmed in your statement is our great and wondrous capacity to survive. And we have to know, though, how we are as a living entity against how they are as a non-living one, and their sophistication as quantum computer. And we're building them now, and these things are beating our thinking processes now, and taking on games or whatever it is. They're showing us that if you make that happen, they can beat us. But as you say, they can't know, they can't feel, they can't love, they can't tangibly offer that sense of togetherness and union and change
that defines our humanity.
Change the mind. They can't change their mind. Their programs run them in a given direction.
Right.
They cannot institutionally change, but we can if we're alive. So in my books, I contrast living, natural being against very, very sophisticated, synthetic, made-up beings that are, I think, the future of a lot of the planets out there in the universe. We haven't yet come to that state, and we ought to take notice before we allow that to happen, what a dangerous thing that might be. And that's simply what I say in the book. The Harvesting of Souls is actually a title given by my publishers. I'm fortunate enough to be published by very reputable publishing houses. And so even though I gave them my own title for this book, they thought that it would sell more copies if they called it something about stealing souls. Now, I had to justify that, of course, if you see what I mean. And I know anyone who's written will know
my attention. They were right. Let me just ask you a question here from our chat room. This is from Stormtrooper. What about the theory that these crafts aren't moving that fast through the universe because they are simply slipping through dimensions, and that for them is only a short journey?
Well, they'll have to define for me what they mean by a dimension. A dimension can be a I don't want to get too technical about this, a spatial quantum or a mental quantum. And so if you think dimensionally in a mental sense, there is nothing there to change. But if you think of it in terms of a physical, spatial, actual spatial sense, like length, breadth, and height, then there are things to be changed mechanically. And that's a different modus operandi altogether. So it's really a technical situation. But I take your point. Yes, to know something is in itself a dimension of knowing that thing. So you have a dimension of an idea. If you look at your room, all of that conceptual, all that's in that room is a dimension of how that thing reflects in your mind. So that's a mental dimension, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
and then you've got the actual length, breadth, and height and hardware stuff, and that's something much different. That's mechanical. You can actually have to physically change that and so on. So you've got different things you're looking at here, you know. Patricia, you've got to define it in this world of ours. You can't just make the claims without actually convincing people.
Right. There's, again, this is where it's unfortunate that our government or shadow government or whomever has all the information here doesn't step forward and start sharing more of it. So we're left to basically guess at what we know or what we're seeing. But these are all good questions for people to ask, I think. And here's another one.
Indeed.
This is from Gray Being, and then we're going to have to go to a short break. Are these droids totally self-efficient, where they can rationalize and they are programmed for the task to collect data on Earth to return the info to the engineers who designed them? Is that one of their tasks?
Well, you know, when you're traveling at 30,000 miles an hour, or you have these things tapping energy from the sun, you actually see them, huge, huge masses, ships they call them, that are some kind of craft pulling out energy from the sun. So much verification of these things that they can't be faked. Well, what are these things gathering that massive amount of energy for? We've got this planet, we can't even run on fossil fuels without poisoning it. And these things can tap plasma from the sun in sizes as big as our planet, some of these things. Some are even bigger than our planet. They come to our sun and tap this energy. Well, what kind of thing is this? Why are they here? Why haven't they taken us over? What are they here for? Is something stopping them? It's more likely that something we have is actually stopping them. And that would be nice to know, wouldn't it?
That would be very nice to know.
What is it? Stop these guys, you know?
You've talked a little bit in your book about melanin in the skin, and that's interesting. We're going to have to get a little bit more into that. But, I mean, these are all very important questions because we are being mined for certain things. We're being taken for certain things. And as David Jacobs, who's a friend of yours also and a friend of ours, has said, there are hybrids already here living among us. And the people who have been abducted, according to David, are being taken now to train those hybrids how to fit in as humans.
Yeah, indeed. And why are they doing that? Why can they not, if they really have all that technology, simply take us over? Why do they have to actually replace us piece by piece? There must be something within some human beings that resist them doing this. And my idea was to try to find out what this magic ingredient might be. And one of the things I was looking at was a pigment called melanin, which actually is very important, you know, Patricia. If I might just take a moment to explain this, I hope it's not too complex. In our DNA, which makes and dictates what we shape like and what we are made of, there are these codes of chemicals in a certain sequence. If you alter those codes, then the DNA produces another shape, a protein. So the DNA is like a special blueprint that will make whatever that DNA in its sequence says you have to make. And then we make human beings or animals or whatever from it. Now, the thing about that is, in order to change those codes, you have to get to the DNA. And the DNA is in the center of every cell in its nucleus. And all our DNA, the plan, so to speak, the plans from which everything is made is inside the middle of the cell in the nucleus. Right.
Okay,
now,
we're going to have to stop there for a second, Nigel, because
okay.
we're going to have to take a very short commercial break.
Okay.
But we are going to come back, and everybody buckle up. I mean, this is going to be a really exciting ride as we continue to talk about stealing souls and Nigel Kerner's book, which is Gray Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls. Great, great, great stuff. Okay, everybody, you are listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio. And we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girlz Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker, and I am here with my co-host, PK, and our terrific guest tonight. It is Nigel Kerner, and we're talking about the Greys and what their agenda is here on the planet. There's that beautiful book. PK's holding it up. Right. And we were just in the middle, before the break, of a discussion about melanin and how that affects the way extraterrestrials contact us or don't. So tell us more about this, Nigel. What's up with this?
See, the crucial thing was, I think this happened on our planet a few 100,000 years ago. We found a species called human beings somewhere in the world, but they found that species didn't have the capacity to understand the kind of machine-type quantum psychology that these things were. So they had to adapt the species to be able to understand that. And so they set about genetically altering our species. To do that, you had to get to the melanin, you had to get to the center of the cell where the genes were stored in chromosomes. And those chromosomes were in what they call the nucleus of the cell. But they ran up with a problem. They couldn't get into the center of those that central area, the nucleus, because it was surrounded. The first people they met were Africans. All the people on the earth when they came were all in the mid-band of the planet, in the dark, in the areas where there was a lot of sunshine. Now these Africans had therefore had round the nucleus these melanin granules that stop the sun from actually radiating the DNA and altering it. It was a protection from ultraviolet light coming in. Melanin absorbed the lights, and that light then couldn't change the DNA. So the whole species prospered within that normality. However, when these things came here, they found that they needed the capacity to rise, but they couldn't get through the melanin because the thing that they use, the surgical knife they used to try to cut in there into the center, was in fact light, ultraviolet light. And unfortunately for them and for us, the melanin stopped their ultraviolet light cutting tool from getting in and altering us. So it took them a long, long time before they could do this. And that only happened when an albinoid type of human being who didn't have the melanin protecting it in the center allowed them in. And then they started to construct from that individual different types of humanity. And this, I think, we have to be made aware of. They are constructing a humanity that they want to take away from this planet for their own uses. And I'm talking now machines. So that's a threat I want to warn the world about. If right, we have a big deal here, all of us.
It is a big deal.
They could deconstruct our melanin and our chromosomes, and so make whatever they want of their kind and their fashion. And it will be done to us not by living things, but by machines, these kinds of android greys and whatever.
We were speaking about this off the air, and this, it sounds like real-life Cybermen is what they are constructing. Just like you see in Doctor Who, that they take humans and then they turn them into machines. And I will share this story with everybody now because I think it's really important. We've mentioned a number of times on the air David Paulides and the incredible police work that he has done. We really admire him. He has done, and you talk about following a logical pattern, Nigel, and certainly David has done that. And he has investigated all of these disappearances throughout the United States and throughout the world,
Right.
starting with the national parks, where these people have just gone missing, and sometimes they find a body but no cause of death, and sometimes they don't find the body. So
Indeed.
what happened was George Lugo, who's a good friend of PK's, we all got together to work on something called the American Skull Experiment, which meant that we would try to contact the beings that are around us, the beings that work with us on the other side and from other dimensions, and we would go looking for some of these missing people that David had identified. So we looked at 3 of them, and what we found was so horrific that I didn't even want to report it on the air. Remember, PK?
Right.
I said, I'm not so sure.
Scary.
We should tell people what we saw, because it was something I struggled with and had sleepless nights over. One of the men that we searched for, the body had been found. He was a doctor, and he was an expert hiker. They found him in an odd place, which is one of the things that David identifies in his books, something to look for, somewhere where he shouldn't have been. He was dead, and they couldn't really determine the cause of death. When we went in to look at this, what we saw was exactly what you described in the book.
Right.
These beings took his soul, dumped the body. They were
Right.
after his soul. That's why there was no cause of death that could be actually determined. They always say something like hypothermia or head injury, but that really wasn't the cause of death.
Right.
The cause of death was they took the soul. Now, the other person that we went looking for was a man who had gone missing from a bar. That nobody saw any videotape of him leaving, going anywhere. He was gone. And we found him located in like a huge warehouse, and what we saw was awful. We saw his feet kind of implanted into the floor of this building. He was hooked up to all kinds of machinery. This looked to us exactly what you described as the beginning of creating Cybermen, or using a human being to fuel whatever in the world they were doing there. Again, this was way beyond any reference point we had ever seen before. It was horrific. He was aware that we were looking at him. He was aware that we wanted to help him. Now, there was a third person that went missing. Her name was Stacy Ann, and what we found with her was it had nothing to do with any of this. It was something completely different. Mm-hmm. She is still alive, but she is not on the planet. So those are the things that we found, but that's why when we saw your book, we're like, we got to get Nigel on the air, because we know what you're identifying is in fact the case, and we think that it has a lot to do with these people who go missing in our national parks and elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, a wonderful thing. You've made a tangible connection there that's extremely useful, Patricia and PK, if I may say so. And it's wonderful, invaluable work pointing to what this whole phenomenon might actually be. The reason I think they defined this, you defined it as a soul. Well, I first have to, in my terms, try to talk about a soul, what it might be. But I believe a soul is that connecting mechanism that brings us back to life. And the ancient people of India and places like that believe in reincarnation. In fact, every religion at one point in time, all of them believed in reincarnation, until somebody found in the Christian ethic that one of the Holy Roman Emperor Justinian's wife, Theodora, was told that she was a witch in a past life, and she got her husband, who was in charge of the Christian ethic, to scrub all references to reincarnation. But almost every religion, in fact, every religion is catalogued as at once upon a time saying we come back into subsequent bodies. We live and we go and come back. Now, the soul, therefore, I believe, is a mechanism that can travel the entire universe instantly and go to where it needs to go, anywhere. And all of us have this wondrous propensity, I now come to believe. Remember, I'm a scientist talking about this, and it's been extremely difficult for me to actually get my head around this, but I finally now have a tangible sequence that can actually point this in a science way with quantum mechanics and all kinds of quantums, if you see what I mean. I won't go into it because it's complex.
Right.
And so
Yes.
therefore, and it'll take a long time anyway, but the point is that it does point to a marvelous capacity we have as living beings to be able to return and carry on. But these machine types have discovered that if they could append to this, they too could do this. Otherwise, as machines, they will break up in the universe. Like everything does rot. Everything goes one way, you know, PK. Why doesn't it go the other way? People have to ask. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. It breaks everything down. It rots everything. And I think that these things will just break down in time. So what they have found is if they find human beings that can carry on, they can then carry on too. And
that
that's
makes
what they're
sense
trying to
to
do.
me.
Absolutely. It will
And
go on
so
and
you've
on and on.
identified
And I think that's
these
why
grays
they're
are
here.
finite. That makes sense. I mean, it sounds like these grays are finite, and so they're looking to us to extend their own existence.
Absolutely.
So,
And that's why
the
I'm
science-
saying what I'm saying. I hope that's not too hysterical, but I tell you,
No,
when
not
you
at all.
discover this and you look at it, you think, holy mackerel, this is something incredible here.
it's huge. And the thing is, Nigel, as we talked before, all three of us about this may be one of the reasons, if not the reason, that the government does not want to divulge information, because how would
You bet.
people feel
You
if
bet.
they knew that we were being used for parts by these grays? I mean, we wouldn't take it all that
Absolutely.
well. But, I
Yeah.
mean, certainly we understand ships in the sky. So many people have seen them, and we know people have been abducted, and we believe them. So we've kind of got past all that. But this is a whole new psychological thriller aspect of the abduction phenomenon, and it takes it to an entirely different level.
It's just an idea, Patricia. I want to tell you, I have to look at this as well, as dispassionately as I can, even though I find it the most plausible reason why these things might be here and bothering with our small planet and its smaller propensity, shall we say, over 180 years of technology. Why are they bothering? They're bothering because we have this commodity of life and return in the universe. And anything that lives with the capacity of a human being to store knowledge, they are trying to improve that capacity so that they themselves can fit in with their 1,000-year-old knowledge, perhaps. I'm talking about machines now. Machines appending to living beings. Now, how they do this, I explain in my third book, how they might do this. I must say, nobody can definitively say this, and I won't claim anything like that. But it's a set of ideas that I'm hoping to throw to the world, and then the cleverer people, perhaps than me, can come in and give us a much more well-informed thesis about how this might be done. And that's really the thing. Like you explore with the same way.
Here's a question for you, Nigel, because this is supposed to be the planet of free will. So how are they taking over our will to do what they do?
The point about it is, that's a very good point. Why did the great teachers come and say, we have to do this and do this and do this? I think it was to prepare to get us away from the reach of these things. And if we have qualities in such a way that we move this power of life and death in our soul into an area where they can't reach us at death, then we will get away from them and it won't happen to us. And I think what we call good and bad is quite simply what these great teachers, religious teachers, were trying to tell us, was a momentum towards these things, or indeed away from them. And if you get away from them, you will preserve your ancestral propensity to come back and be a human and have your freedom. And you put your finger on it when you use the axiom free will. We will have free will. If we don't allow us to get in their range, they will take that away from us.
They will.
And so that's the greatest, And
I'll tell you a way that they do it. I'll tell you a way they do it that I found out about just recently. They have the capacity to walk into our dreams, our dream state, and that's when they ask us a question if they can take us. Now, because we're in a dream state, because a lot of people do not have charge over their dream state, they may just give permission And I've seen this happen, and it almost happened to me until I caught on to what was really asking me this question. And I said, no, you can't. But had I not had the experience as a dream analyst and someone who works with their dreams a lot, I wouldn't have recognized this trap. So I do see that they have that capacity. They have no problem using it against us.
Yeah. The central thing we have, all of us, is the ability to know ourselves, and that means free will. And so if we do not have that power, that's the central power. Nothing can actually overrule that. The Christian teacher, for instance, had to tell his father, so to speak, yes, thy will be done, not mine. You understand? So
yes,
even if it goes that high far, if you are a Christian and you believe in a religion or whatever, and that if that then expounds that ethic, I believe, that in any ethic, whether any religion, the free will of a single human being is the most paramount right of all. And if you give that up, not even realizing that you are, then something else can come in. There's some switch there that allows the entry and occupation of someone dependent on what you, Patricia, call free will.
Yes. I mean, this is why it's so important. This is a great experiment for us to embrace our own consciousness, our own expansion. Again, knowing yourself is so important. Being able to use the tools that you have to determine, what you want for yourself, and not give in to the impulses of these alien grays who have a totally different agenda and don't care about you. As you mentioned, Nigel, they have no morals. They have no internal moral compass. Yeah, they're just going to do what their task requires, and they don't care about how we feel about it.
Well, they have no emotion. If they don't have emotion, how could they tell what we feel?
Absolutely, and don't you find that terrifying? That here is something incidentally acting on a program that's not doing it to be wicked, but just doing it because it's following a program. Right, Isn't that awful?
It's scary.
Yeah,
that's even more scary, because when you don't feel it, you can't really think and put yourself in another space. All we end up with is the residual of what's left.
I think you've made some wonderful breakthroughs, if I may say so, and long may that continue.
We hope so. Here's some more questions for you, Nigel. This is from Silent Whisper. Did these grays come here with an agenda, or did they develop some ideas once they found us?
See, when you make anything artificial, don't give it the license to protect itself at any cost. If you make something shall we say our power stations have to be looked after by robots in the future. We make super robots, and we tell the robots, look after yourself so you can look after our power station so you can look after us. Because they will then take that on and then see the person who created them to be the biggest danger to them and take that person out. And so, unless you write the program very carefully, you can take yourself out by thinking you've got a bonus making these things to help you. And that's called the paradox, the alien paradox. I've written it out in my book as simply as I can. But I tell you what, if I was a great advanced nation, I would never create a artificial intelligent robot. It is deadly. They can actually
I think there's that potential for it, no question. Yeah, no question about that. Now, here's another person from the chat room. This is Henry O. And Henry's asking, should we interpret this as a spiritual awakening for us?
My opinion is that. Yeah, I would say to you that spiritual opening is the most important thing that every single human being can actually have. And I'm not preaching here. Please understand, no matter who you are, you have that wonderful facility to say no.
Yes, exactly. You can say no to these things, and they have to get away from you. And that's what I found out that evening that I had that dream when they were trying to trick me. And I was like, if this is happening to me, it's happening to lots of people this way.
Oh, gosh,
yes. That's why
the Greys aren't a spiritual. I must make this point, please. The Greys, I don't believe, are a spiritual awakening themselves. They are just a utility. We must have the spiritual awakening that says, don't make Grey type android super beings. That's the awakening that we must have. Thank you.
Now, let me ask you, Nigel, about another thing, and this is the Men in Black, because we've heard
Mhm.
a lot of stories about the Men in Black also being robotic or some type of android. What do you think about that? Have you considered what they are? Have you heard stories about them?
I think it's very naive, and it points to the fact that these grey androids are living in the past, so to speak. So they create caricatures that can be spotted by everyone as ludicrous things that went out with 40s films, gangster films. So they make these things because they thought perhaps that these things had influence in our capacities on the earth. Maybe Hollywood is responsible. I don't mean to sound trite and frivolous, but it's crazy, really. These things that they make that are supposed to go in and do their functions and so forth. Maybe they think these androids create human beings or pseudo-humans out of the people they have kidnapped or whatever, or taken over, and then they make them into facsimiles that nobody really believes anymore. If you see what I mean.
But
so
they do scare the heck out of people, because we know
they
people
do,
that
but
have
you've
seen
got to be
them.
able to say to them, hang on a minute, Al Capone died a long time ago. Bye-bye.
What about black-eyed children?
I don't
Nigel?
take them that seriously myself, I must say.
But what about the black eye? We also have reports, many recently.
Right.
It started in the 90s of black-eyed children. Again, another. What are these things? Do you have any? Is this any connection?
Well, I think
to
they're
the Greys?
halfway houses. Yeah, I think these are halfway house types in transition from one state to another. The thing that you found in.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I don't know why it fits, but it fits.
Yeah, it does.
Huh. Oh, that's brilliant, Nigel. We like that.
We'll accept that one, Nigel.
Yeah, we will. We'll put that. We'll put that as one piece of the puzzle that we now have, which we appreciate. Yes, I mean, now again, let's go back to David Jacobs for a minute, because he says we're screwed. We can't stop these things. They're already here. They're already living among us. They've got their agenda, and they've got a way of, presenting this that enough people won't believe it until it's way too late.
Yeah. Well, my advice to my children, and this is all I can do, is tell my own children, my advice to them is keep your sweetness and goodness and goodwill together, and nothing will ever take your soul away.
Oh,
Very good advice.
I like that very
Yes.
much, Nigel.
Yes, that's very good advice.
I will continue to eat a lot of candy to sweeten me up.
I will too. I will sacrifice that, and I will, I will definitely eat more candy. Anyways, here's
It's been an
another quick
absolute
question for you,
privilege
Nigel.
talking to you.
Yeah, that's right. Here is another quick question. So before we go to break again, and this is, where'd it go? It's up here. We love you people in the chat room. Thank you so much for joining the show. Again, if you want to send a question over, it's irnchat.com. That's irnchat.com. How long do you believe these beings have been visiting Earth? That question's from Chris.
Yeah, well, actually, in a sense, if they've been visiting for 10 years or for 1 month, if they're superior to us and can control us, then the time they've been here might account, as history shows us, from Egypt to all the civilizations in the past, they may well have been creating our species to suit a model they want for many, many hundreds of thousands of years. But the point about it is that something there is about us that doesn't let them take the whole lot of us out. And we know we have to find those resistance points, work on them to stop this whole process once and for all, so we can find that last computerized anomaly we call a gray or whatever it is, and stop it dead and save the natural living power of our species of human beings. And without sounding too much like a preacher, my family would be laughing hearing this about me. Anyway, the point about it is, I really truly believe this. Just keep the young ones sweet, and they will help us with this.
Yes, they will. They will. But we're going to have to take another very short commercial break and come back again and talk more about this. Gray Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls by Nigel Kerner. Here's the book. And again, we think this is really going on, everybody. We got to
Good book.
get our consciousness expanded, we have to find out what are the triggers here. And again, we'll be right back. You're listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girlz Radio. It is an exciting night tonight.
Oh, that it is.
I am your host, Patricia Baker. I am here with my co-host, very exciting herself, Patricia Kirkman, PK.
Thank you.
And our exciting guest, who is keeping us on the edge of our seat here, Nigel Kerner. He's talking about gray aliens and their agenda here. Their agenda. What are they doing here? He is exposing this so everybody can get very aware of what's coming up and how to deal with it. So, Nigel, what else can you share with us about this? Because we were asking all these questions at the beginning. What else can you tell us?
Yeah, well, can you just imagine, if I was a Grey General, what would I do if I wanted a captive audience? I would give them all my little trinkets and technology and my toys to play with.
All
I
the
would give them
iPhones, all the
latest
iPads,
version
yes.
or whatever. And we've got the whole world. I was in South Africa, and the South Africans in the villages of Soweto and so on, almost every one of them had a mobile phone with a camera.
Wow.
Wherever you
kidding.
went, there's someone with a mobile phone and the camera. Now, can you imagine, if I was a Grey General and I wanted to capture the human population, I'd give them my technology. I would give them these trinkets. And what would that do? It would isolate us from each other. And it is happening now. If you look around the world,
what people go out to dinner.
Too much.
Yes.
They're all
So what I'm saying is that what they think is a wonderful bonus when they give you all these things and the latest kind of iPhone or whatever, that sounds to me and looks to me rather an insidious gift, really. If it's used for the benefit of human beings and we can command it, Patricia, PK, that would be wonderful. But, it tends not to do that. And so if you reverse the thing and you become its slave, now all these things have been said, this is not new, and that's what I believe, and from a small family point of view, because in the end I'm also a dad, and my wife is a mom, and we've got the children, and we all are family people, and so on. In the end, we have to think about this humanity of ours. And to me, whatever I write about gray aliens or whatever they might be and speculate about it, I try to be as informed as I can, but I am not here to preach. I just look at it from a dad's point of view. Right. And I say these things to you from that point of view, really. And we ought not to be suddenly clouded by all this stuff being thrown at us every day so that we lose that simple sense of each other as human beings. And I think that's what the great teachers were trying to say to us in the past, wherever they came from. Be careful you don't lose custody of your own sense of each other. If that ever happens, then you don't need gray aliens, you don't need robots, you're gone anyway.
I don't have anything.
That is the truth. It really is, Nigel. Very well said.
Yeah, you watch people walking down the street. They're not looking at anything around them. They're looking at their hands.
Yeah, their cell phones.
Their cell phones. People go out to dinner. They sit across from one another. They don't even speak to each other.
Yeah.
They're busy on the phone or working on it.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little story. A friend of mine was in Italy recently. It's quite an anecdote that brings it out. And they went into this church. The service was going on, and they were walking along some Christian edifice it was, and they were looking in through this church. And as they walked in, they saw a young audience, and all of them seemed to be bent over, kneeling down devotionally. And they thought, isn't that lovely to see a young audience all bent over, concentrating on the service? Nobody will believe how devotional and devoted this scene is. They walked a little further up, and they could see the audience from the front. And when they turned around, almost all of them were looking at their mobile phones.
Oh, God.
Yep. That's devotion for you. Oh, my goodness.
When she told me the story, this lady, I just burst out laughing. And she was rather offended and said, don't you think that's awful? I said, of course it's awful. But I thought it was funny because the fact that she expected to be in this world for it to be anything different surprised me, really. If you see what I mean. And
yes,
I did
absolutely.
have to placate her and say I really was shocked about it. I was, indeed. That all of them
Oh,
He said it was a young audience. That's why she was so impressed by the fact that they were bent over, thinking they would.
Praying. Enjoying the service, yeah.
There you
It's
go.
really a shame. It's really a shame, but exactly what PK was saying is happening every day. And now I hear Apple is trying to find ways to teach children not to be addicted to their phones, which will be an interesting thing how they accomplish this. But in the meantime, we have much bigger things to be concerned about. As we move forward as the human race, because we are under siege. And it's a secret situation, and anything that's secret is doubly dangerous.
right.
So, I wonder, Nigel, what's your opinion about disclosure? Do you think that our governments collectively are going to come clean on this? What's your thought?
I think the only thing that can actually make sure of it, Patricia, I think this is just simple common sense. I think most people will probably, if they think about it, agree. If you don't, out of your own terms of reference as an individual, shout as much as you can at something that you know is patently wrong, then nothing will be done by governments. Governments only follow the party line, so to speak, and usually they're power hungry. To be cynical, they're power hungry people. And I don't think I've ever seen a government around the world wherever that you found truly altruistic people serving everybody. So we have to therefore individually take it into our own hands to be privately. Don't go out and cause all kinds of ructions and whatever it is and riots or whatever, but be firm within what you believe and hope that your friends will join in. And if they are working to secret things that are being done against the interests of humanity, then surely their humanity knows that there's a first person they look at most of all, and that is our species. If they take away our species, we are all gone too. So to me, as a writer, when I sit and write these things down, I have to look at them and understand that my children will read that too. And as a father, I have to be responsible to them. So my first person, if you like, that I look to is what will a dad say to children, really, basically. And I take that point of view as a writer.
Yeah, I agree. Now, here's a
very
really, really interesting question. And this is from, probably not going to pronounce this correctly, Rian Gresham. I'm curious to know why these aliens have been reported to create hybrid children with their abductees. What is the genetic material that they are mixing our DNA with, since they are robots?
They hate melanin. Melanin stops their actual ultraviolet light pens from cutting into our DNA. And melanin is a magical component which, if you have a good covering of, you have an advantage. They tend to leave you alone. But if they can get through that melanin, then they can alter you. And you've got to be extremely careful that they might be aiming to do that. Professor David Jacobs, interviewed a female abductee who described how she was shown a hybrid baby, as you probably know, and asked to hold it and hug it. And then Jacobs asked her about the skin color of the baby. Does it have light skin or dark skin within a Caucasian range? Her answer was fair, quite fair. I think it is very fair, as a matter of fact, she said. Almost like no ultraviolet light for this guy. This seems to be the norm for most of the hybrid witnesses, and is epitomized in the blonde, blue-eyed Nordic type of alien that are witnessed by many abductees. So that's a warning for us. It really is that they're looking for this type of kind of DNA prospectus, because that is easily worked on.
So
and
this
then
DNA that they're mixing with the women and men they've been abducting for breeding purposes, this is stuff they're basically growing in a lab and then introducing.
Indeed. I mean,
so
for instance,
it's not their own DNA. It is DNA that they're creating in a laboratory somewhere and then mixing that. Well, that would make sense anyway.
The only thing that I could find about that's common practice with what these things are doing, in my researches, that runs in a line straight through, Patricia, is that, for instance, in the last war, it has been reported that Hitler had an alien encounter in which he was shown a blonde, blue-eyed ideal that he later sought to emulate as Aryan purity. And when he was asked when he was asked about it, he said, "I have seen the new man, and he is cruel and intrepid." Now, he formed his idealized format based on this. Now, that's not to say that every blue-eyed individual is alienized. All I'm saying is that these people come in there and they use this because this facility is easier to be manipulated, if you see what I mean, with their technology, and maybe that's a weakness all of us should rally round and protect these types of people from. If we don't do that, then maybe these guys will take them all away, or in some kind of way use them. So I think the world ought to be warned about this, is what I'm saying, because this comes up in research point after research point that I see. So when you ask me what's the most dangerous thing, what could be the best thing against all this, I would say beware that there are certain biological insects that these things prefer to work on to hybridize our species and allow them to actually be acting like us, but a machine part running their mind and their consensus. And that is something we have to watch very carefully. And if someone is guarding this in governments or whatever, then we ought to be able to expose that for the sake of all our humanity.
Oh, absolutely. This is reaching critical mass. Now, here's another question from Silent Whisper. Did they not care to preserve any history of their makers? I would think that all machines would be programmed to archive data to keep an historical record.
Yeah, well, you have so many instances in past. There have been some very good programs that they show generally on a channel we have in England called Sky, where they talk about ancient aliens and some very well presented theses there on how our history is based upon huge technologies coming and turning primitive people into building things like pyramids and so on. And even though the common invective of scientists is this can be done, it doesn't hang together. These things are incredible, where you can cut a stone, where you can put a razor blade through. How can people, all that way back, be able to have technologies? That's just
but the
not
question,
forward.
I think, also, Nigel, in this case, is about the Greys must know who created them, right?
Not necessarily. If you create a machine, you don't tell the machine, look, you are made by this factory.
Yeah,
this
I'm
is
your
your
creator.
destination. No, they wouldn't do that. They would just create an artificial quantum computer type program which will run this particular thing and get it to self-replicate itself when it runs out, when the second law breaks everything down. And the second law of thermodynamics is the great Satan to me. That's the thing that breaks everything into pieces. And we all have to watch that law, because we all die, don't we? And nothing goes the other way. Really strange, is it not? If there's an up, there's a down. There's always an opposite, but there's no opposite to the momentum of the universe. It all breaks up.
What have you learned from the abductees that you've spoken with about this?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. Sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
What did you learn from the abductees you've spoken with about this whole phenomenon?
First of all, they're very frightened people. Secondly, they don't need to be frightened, because I think more often than not, the abductees that survive the abduction are rejects. They can't do anything to them. So in fact, they have beaten the Greys. But the ones that you don't hear too much about, they are the ones that, it's too late for. If you hear about abductees, I think they have something extraordinary about them, a lot of them, that the Greys can't do anything with. That's why they're here. So it's a good thing to survive them, I think, from my own experience. But I think the ones that are really in danger, you never see, because they've already gone. And, if you look at the number, and if you look at the number of people, you can do this research on the computer, of course, find out how many people a year go missing with no trace in the world. It runs into hundreds of millions. According to WHO figures, it goes to hundreds of thousands, I should say that. Yeah.
Yes,
and so that's awful lot of
goodness.
people just simply going missing every year. And we need to find an answer to this. Where are they going? What is happening? Are these things underground, as many people claim? Are they having
that. Right.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
underground,
And so,
possibly. Underwater,
how are we
possibly.
going? But Patricia, how are we going to get the answers to this unless people in the know, in governments, who know that this is happening, can come out somehow and tell the world? And they have to be very brave people that do this, because they are pilloried all their
And
lives.
you know, we've met some of them. We've invited them on the show, and they're scared to death. For good reason, to come out and talk about this. They've told us things privately, and this is why both PK and I are very knowledgeable about this, because they have spoken, and they know they're knowledgeable people on the inside of this, but to speak publicly is something they are scared to death to do, because they're scared not just for themselves, but for their own children.
Families. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you know, I've been asked that question. If you want to know, you can imagine. They say, well, why are you doing it then, Nigel? And I'd say to them, number one, I'm a perverse rat. Number two, nobody controls me. I'm not employed by anybody. I have independent means. They can't do that to me.
Right.
And I'm very fortunate enough to have such a wicked nature that my wife of 47 years actually admires some things I do.
A great lady.
Oh,
Funny. Here's another question, and this is from Galaxy Hopper. Has the government captured these gray droids and tried to hack them?
I have no idea. To give you a definitive answer, I don't know. I would be guessing.
There are rumors, that's sure, about this. You know, there's also been rumors that they have a deal that they made, a contract with the governments of the world to take a certain amount of people and do with what they wanted. So there's been that rumor. Have you heard about that, and do you know anything about it?
Oh, yes, I have. It'd be very difficult to check that, wouldn't it? Because I don't think they'll let you survive with the knowledge that you've got. If indeed you affirm that this is true, you're probably going to disappear, aren't you?
Well,
See what I mean?
like an
So I don't know how you're going to report on that one.
You're just going to refer back to this interview if we disappear.
Nigel knows where we are.
Yeah, this is what happens, you know, tell the truth. Right?
Actually, I've had fully dressed Apache helicopters checking where I live. So you can imagine I may be making some rocks fall off the side of the mountain somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure you are.
Yes.
I'm sure you are.
Here you go. Yeah, again, you know, I think it is our right to know. I mean, it's our right to know, and we need to embrace our history with these grays and whatever other alien races have been coming here, because we've heard there's a number of them. It's not just the grays, right?
And the point is this: whatever they might have in terms of contracts with a specific type of person or a specific designation of humanity or whatever it is, if you're a machine, who is going to enforce that contract? What judge is going to sit in judgment of the machine? You can't. So the problem is there can't be contracts or whatever. There must be some kind of exchange mechanism that they give to people and say, we will look after you if you help us to do this. Now, those people are likely to be the richest, perhaps the most powerful people in the world. And of course, if any catastrophe happens, Patricia, can you see you and I being included in those lists? Of course not. I'll be the first to go, by the way. So maybe I can say bye-bye now to you.
I got a feeling the three of us are going together then.
Yeah, really. Goodness. Well, again, it's our right to know. We have a heritage here. We have a background. We're created by these aliens. If you watch Ancient Aliens, that's certainly what they're saying. And I tend to agree. You talk about this in your book also, Nigel, that we have this incredible blast of technology. Where did it come from?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, indeed. Too quickly and too thorough for us to believe it's anything but something extraordinary. And when I see Gordon Cooper, a beautiful man like Gordon Cooper, tell us that one of these landed in front of him in one of the Air Force bases he landed on, and when he took the photographs and gave it to these people, he never saw them again. And he was branded with doubt and so on. Your great, worthy astronaut, Gordon Cooper. There you are. So who is sacred? And Ed Mitchell, a revered scholar, in his, people that abroad in Britain and all over the world admire. How can these people be kind of abandoned by a bunch of people who think either Either they're controlled or have some privilege granted to them. And I wouldn't make any contract between 4 fingers and no thumbs. I always check my wife's fingers, by the way, just in case.
It's always good to check.
Yeah, they say hands up, now you know why.
Oh gosh. Well, this is a very important issue. You're a very brave man, Nigel, and it's also good that you can talk about this and maintain your sense of humor, because this can get very dark. I mean, it can get very scary. I'm sure we'll be hearing from some of our listeners who are going to write to us and say, I love the show, but I had nightmares. And that's okay too, because sometimes
I'll tell you what,
it
there
takes
is
a
no
little
darkness if you switch the light on.
There you go. Turn the light on. Put your night
Like
light
that
on
idea.
like when you're 3. Yeah. I know. It's
that.
But this is a big, big issue, and you are very brave to take this on, and you do present this in a very logical, academic manner. And so it's great. We can't thank you enough for being one of the truth tellers in this world today. And always remember, we're 2 or
this
more
might be a mutual admiration,
gathered.
but I must tell you, this might be a mutual admiration society. But I tell you what, I haven't met 2 sweeter interviewers in a long, long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you,
a
Nigel.
doll. Well, we are going to have you back because we heard that you're writing another book. So tell us a little bit about that book.
Yeah, well, that is to do with where we might finally go, where our destiny might be. It's a kind of summary of all the things I've said in the other books, and it is I suppose, Patricia, after doing all of this stuff for so long and being tied up upside down, so to speak, with technicalities and so on, I kind of let rip a bit in this one.
Let it all hang out, Nigel.
Let me tell you, I don't think I have anything to lose anymore.
Oh, that's right. What's the name of your new book?
Okay, and I love America the best. It's a lovely old country, and I give it my heart.
Well,
Thank you very much.
But we still need the name of your new book. Do you have a name for it yet?
It's called The Margins of Forever.
Ooh.
Oh, gosh, that
Great
sounds
title.
really powerful. I love that.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Oh.
All right. Well, listen, you got to promise to come back, Nigel. We so
Right.
thoroughly
I'll do
enjoyed
that.
having you on our show. Thank you so
God
very
bless and keep
much.
you both
And
safely.
right now,
There it
My
is.
love to America.
it's good.
Okay. Well, if you get to the States, you got to look us up, Nigel. And
Definitely.
Okay.
we look forward to meeting you in person someday. We'll definitely have you back on the show.
And you too. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And now, bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.
Take care,
Bye.
Nigel.
Now, next week, everybody, we have another superstar coming on the show, and this is Dr. Stanley Krippner, and he is joining us to talk about the late, great medicine man, Rolling Thunder. He was very close to Rolling Thunder. I had the pleasure of meeting Rolling Thunder only once. I will never forget it. So please join us. Next week, we will be back with another new show, another exciting show, and until then, we'll see you on the Blue Highway, everybody. Good night.
Good night.